George III, Prince of Anhalt-Dessau, was a German prince of the House of Ascania and ruler of the Principality of Anhalt-Dessau. After 1544 he became the first ruler of the Principality of Anhalt-Plötzkau. George was the third son of Ernest I, Prince of Anhalt-Dessau, by his wife Margarete, daughter of Henry I, Duke of Münsterberg-Oels and granddaughter of George of Poděbrady, King of Bohemia. Life. He was mainly brought up with his brothers John V and Wikipedia by his devout mother. After the death of his father in 1516, he inherited Anhalt-Dessau as a co-ruler with his brothers. With the assistance of his kinsman Adolf, the Bishop of Münsterberg, George was elevated to the rank of canon in that see in 1518, and attended the University of Leipzig, where the theologian Georg held of Pforzheim became his highly beloved teacher. In 1524 Adolf consecrated George as a priest, that he might be better able to refute Lutheran beliefs. He made a thorough study of the Bible, the Church Fathers, and church history. The extreme emotional tensions and qualms of conscience into which his investigations brought him induced a violent illness that left its mark on him for the rest of his life. It was only after his mother's death that he made peace with his religious convictions. From the time of the Diet of Augsburg in 1530, both George and his brothers allied themselves with the Lutherans. After the first evangelical celebration of the Mass at Dessau on Maundy Thursday in 1534, George visited the district churches, making the fewest possible changes in the church practices in accordance with his natural disposition and with Luther's acquiescence. In the interest of peace, he sought to deter Luther in 1538 from publishing his tract against the Bishop of Magdeburg, and persuaded him in 1542 not to circulate his sharply worded tract on the feud of Wurzen. In 1544 the protector of Münsterberg Cathedral, Maurice of Saxony, appointed his brother Augustus as administrator, but because the latter was not a cleric, Maurice designated George as his coadjutor in spiritual affairs. Quote, that year, he and his brothers decided to divide the Principality of Anhalt-Dessau. Formally, George received Plötzkau. In his new capacity as coadjutor, George forthwith proceeded, in company with Antonius Musa, just then appointed cathedral preacher at Münsterberg, to visit all of the cathedral parishes, exhibiting great patience, tactful discretion, and forbearance. He next conferred with Maurice in the matter of a prospective liturgy, which, in accordance with his suggestions and by virtue of the deliberations of the consistories of Münsterberg and Meissen, was officially completed at Altnell in 1545. From then on George convened the cathedral clergy twice a year to a synod in Münsterberg Cathedral, and on such occasions discoursed upon the questions and evils of the time. He based these conciones synodici on outlines furnished to him by Melanchthon. Of the many sermons which he delivered in the cathedral, only a few have been preserved. They are distinguished by temperate and lucid exposition. When the Schmalkald War broke out, in spite of his efforts to prevent it, George received under his roof the fugitive Camerarius and his family. He also interceded for Jonas, who had incurred the anger of Maurice of Saxony, and sought to restrain the clergy from suspicious and frivolous words that might serve to cause discord. Quote, although he hated the Augsburg interim, he felt that he ought to lend a hand in the preparation of the Leipzig interim, in order to preclude still worse results. In 1549 the emperor's candidate Michael Heldink was postulated by the chapter as Bishop of Münsterberg. Until his arrival, George was to continue administering the diocese, to strengthen the Lutheran confession as firmly as possible before the threatening storm. He now delivered his powerful sermons on the false prophets, and on the right worthy sacrament of the body and blood of Christ, which were directed both against Rome and Protestant religious fanatics. Afterward he retired to his estates in Anhalt. Traveling often to Wormsdorf, he continued to preach there, and when the occasion presented itself, he sought to mediate the Oschandrian dispute. He died unmarried after lingering sickness, and Melanchthon composed his epitaph. His unfeigned piety, gentleness, and love of peace, his benevolence and freedom of service, all earned him the honorable epithet devout or pious. His theology was that of Luther. His personal library has been preserved intact, and is now part of the Anhalt-Ische Landesbücherei at Dessau, along with an exhibition to honor his 500th birthday.